Estamos aquí con el profesor Rollins, es un destacado académico, vicerrector de la Universidad de Oxford, hablando de la educación superior. Professor Rollins, we're talking about why Oxford and not Harvard. These universities, Oxford, Harvard, a few others, have become global universities. They're now competing for the best students from all over the world. Mm-hmm. No longer best students from the UK, but from all over the world, same with Harvard. If you're an 18-year-old Chinese or an 18-year-old Mexican, why Oxford and not Harvard, given the criteria that you were...
So I think one of the first things you should ask yourself is whether the university that you're going to go to is one that gives you a broader education from which you eventually funnel into your own area of interest, or whether it's one that you go in smack into an area that you know you want to do. And that's one very obvious difference between UK universities in general and US universities in general. Yeah. Also Oxford and Harvard necessarily. So in Oxford, particularly at the undergraduate level, you tend to think, I want to do this subject. You go in and boy, you get on with it. Yeah. So there's a very rapid trajectory, as opposed to a system in which there's a very broad first year, in which, from which you decide,
first 2 years.
Indeed, from which you eventually decide, in what do I want to major? So that's one big difference. Yeah. And that depends on if you know what you want to do or you want to discover what you want to do. That would be one of my criteria. Second, how seriously international is a place? Now, Oxford has got a long tradition of international education. We took in our first recorded international student in 1190, Emo of Friesland. I don't know what he studied, but he was very lucky to get a place.
Exactly.
And Oxford has, at the moment, about 40% of its students are from overseas.
Graduate and undergraduate?
That's combined, yes.
Combined, okay.
The numbers are higher for graduates than undergraduates. So 18% of undergraduates, 61% of graduates. Okay. Harvard, I think, the last time I looked, had about 11% of its intake coming from overseas. Okay. So it's a very different distribution.
Okay.
So if you want to meet people from across the world, you will in both universities. But the proportions you'll meet will be very different. Okay. And then the other thing I would point people towards is, and then given that you know what you want to do, or given that you start doing it, what teaching mode do you prefer? Do you want to go for this intense one-to-one interaction, or are you more comfortable with being part of a group? And I think those are the things that would determine the way I went. Okay. You would get a fabulous education at either. But I think for an individual, one works better than the other. I occasionally meet parents, this is an outrageous pitch, but I occasionally meet parents who have children both at Harvard and at Oxford, and they tend to say at the undergraduate level that Oxford's got it right and Harvard has slightly lost it. And I think that's partly because the extraordinary level of interaction with the best people that undergraduates at Oxford still get on a regular basis is more difficult in Harvard. Yeah. You tend to see the stars from the back of a lecture theatre rather than sitting across a table. Yeah,
an anecdote, this is actually my father's anecdote, but he arrived to do a graduate degree at Cambridge. And he was assigned a tutor, my father's an economist, very famous economist, Nicholas Caldo. Went to see Nicholas Caldo, and Nicholas Caldo said, don't expect to learn anything from me. Everything that's worth learning is written. Go and read stuff. And when you have something to talk to me about, when you have something to discuss, give me a call and we'll get together. It can be very intimidating if you come from an American-type system or a Mexican-type system. Indeed. To meet somebody who throws you out there and tells you to read and think and then come back and discuss.
If I look at the students who come out of those undergraduate courses, I think the Oxford students and the Cambridge students are remarkable for their independence. Okay. They really have learned to stand on their own 2 feet, and they don't expect to be given an answer. Okay. And they don't even expect necessarily for there to be a right answer. What they expect is to know how to get as close as you can to the right answer.
I'll give an anecdote. In this case, it actually happened to me. I remember pressing a tutor for a bibliography. Mm-hmm. And he didn't like to give bibliography, so eventually we pressed him so hard that he said, okay, there is this one book that is just amazing, the best book ever written on this subject. Find it in the library and read the one next to it. Because I've read that famous book, everybody has read that famous book, but the one next to it, who knows, maybe it hasn't been read in 300 years. So I guess it's more of a challenge. I did my graduate degree in the US, and it certainly was far more. You had to read from page 32 to page 51 halfway down.
Yes.
So it's far more rigid in that way. Let me ask you about another issue that is very different, not between the US and the UK, but between Mexico and the US and the UK.
Right.
That is sort of being a day boy versus being a boarder. In Mexico, people live at home and go to the local university.
Yes.
Both in the US and the UK, certainly Oxford, most people leave home, go away, live in college, certainly for the first year, maybe the first 2 years. How do the two compare? Obviously, there's a cost element here, but what does it add, and what are the benefits, but what are the costs or the disadvantages of such a system?
So one of the advantages, of course, is that you bring together a critical mass of really smart people. And going back to who do you really learn from, or how do you learn in university? Of course, part of what you do is you learn from the other students.
Yeah.
So I think the advantage of, if you like, the boarding school method is that you can bring people from all over the country, indeed all over the world, and they are there with each other all the time, and they get total immersion.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant. Disadvantages, it's a hothouse.
Okay.
People sometimes feel, particularly when it's the first time they've left home, it's intimidating. It is frightening. On the other hand,
Cost?
Is
it more expensive?
It will cost more. Okay. Yes, in a sense it will cost more. But actually, it's interesting. In the UK, the cheapest university to attend, if you come from a family with a low income, a UK family with a low income, Oxford's the cheapest university to attend because it works very hard to make sure that it is affordable if people really need help. Okay. So you get to live in medieval buildings at a price that's really rather attractive. Okay. We're very competitive on the housing market. Value for money is fantastic.
Okay. Let me ask you about another thing that is relatively new, certainly newer in a university like Oxford than it is in US universities, and that professional degrees I'm talking about.
Yes.
It seems to me that, I don't know, 50 years ago, all graduate degrees were academic degrees.
Yes.
And suddenly professional degrees appeared on the scene. Very much an American thing, now very much present in universities like Oxford. Oxford started an MBA, etc. How do you see these degrees? A lot of people see them cynically as money-making ventures. Other people say they play a very useful role. What are your views on professional degrees?
So I think they're a very good thing, actually. Okay. Why do I think they're a good thing? Because take the business school in Oxford. It's very...
The Said Business School.
The Said Business School, indeed. And it's unusual because it's got, for example, a 1+1 degree course in which you study an MBA for a year and you study an academic degree for a year embedded in a college. Okay. So that's trying to do something which Oxford is really good at. I talked about the specialisation of degrees there, but because you live in a college, you're surrounded by people doing other things,
of course,
and you talk to them all the time. That's the total immersion side. Okay. So I think it's great for Oxford to get its talents, its teaching capacity, its, if you like, its intellectual standards and rigour, and apply them to professional degrees. In law, of course, we've done it for a long time, although we don't produce qualified lawyers. Yeah. Medicine, we've done it for a long time. The very earliest colleges in Oxford trained doctors, as they might then be, people studying in medicine, along with, of course, theologians and lawyers. That's really how we started out. I think, in an odd way, we're going back to our roots.
Okay. Let me ask you, you've mentioned it several times, college system, tutorial system. Yes. Let's talk about unique things about Oxford that I think are quite unique and make it the university it is. Let's start about the college system. First, I think we need a very brief explanation of what it is, and then why it's so wonderful.
Yes. So Oxford has about 20,000 students and 38 colleges. What is a college? A college is a physical and actually legal institution that's quite independent, but it takes students who study at the university. And it really arises from the way in which a master of some kind, an expert in their subject, would have a little place, lodging, where he and his students, it was all he and them, they were all he at that time, would live, work and interact. In Oxford, that stayed, very importantly, not just somewhere where you sleep and eat, which is a hall of residence, common in many universities. In Oxford, it's also where your tutor, the person who is personally responsible for your education, resides as well. No, they no longer tend to live there, but that's where they work and that's where they operate. So your college provides both the teaching and, if you like, the social life and the interaction.
Okay.
And that's a medieval structure. The buildings, if you look at them, look like small abbeys or monasteries.
Yeah.
They're designed to be defensible when there are riots in the town.
Okay.
And they provide a real home and a human-sized community. And that is a most unusual feature. Again, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
We do all our administration twice in 38 separate institutes. But it gives you extraordinary advantages in terms of the people you meet. You'll be dealing with, there might be 100 people in your year, studying all sorts of disciplines. And if you don't know most of them by the time you've come to the end of the year, you're an unusual person.
Yeah.
So it becomes a family.
Uh-huh. And you think that would be the main advantage of a college system?
Yes, I think it is.
A community,
actually.
a small
it's
community.
a real community with an intellectual heart. It's got a distinctive character, and that character runs through the lives of its students thereafter.
Okay.
People who leave Oxford often say, my heart belongs to my college, even if my head belongs to the university with its laboratories, libraries, museums, and sports teams.
Of course. Another thing that is very unique to Oxford and I understand Cambridge as well is the tutorial system.
Yes.
How did, you briefly mentioned it before, and you more or less explained how that came about.
Let me tell you what it's like.
Yeah.
So when I started as an undergraduate, like you, when you were lucky, I'd be given a list of things to read, not just a textbook. Go and find this article, that article, see if there are any others you find interesting. And when you've read them all, use them to answer this question, and then write me an essay on it, bring it to me, and we'll discuss it. I'd spend maybe 15 to 18 hours each week on each tutorial, doing 15 hours preparation, 3 hours writing, and then I'd go and fight it out with my tutor. If he didn't agree with me, then it was my job to show him he was wrong, or else his job to show me I was wrong. And that's a very intense and curiously intimate relationship. In the old system, when typically you only ever were taught by your tutor in your college, the same person would see you through 3 or 4 years of maturation. It's really like watching your child grow up and hoping to make them into an even better child than they were when they started.
Now, there's lots of lectures at the same time.
Yes.
I always, retrospectively, I thought the tutorial system was the most amazing thing ever. But I also realized that I didn't go to lectures because I had tutorials. And I now regret not having gone to lots of lectures given by lots of famous people. Do lectures suffer as a result of the tutorial system?
I think they used to.
Okay.
Of course, there were amazing people who came in. As you've said, when Chomsky came to lecture in Oxford, everybody wanted to be there. And the same would be true of many others. But the lectures have a much more important part in the curriculum now. Partly because we've slightly shifted the way we examine. So we examine on some things that are taught only in lectures. So you'd better be there. And your tutor, me, will make sure that you do go.
One final question before we end this conversation. Mexico and Oxford. What does Oxford have to offer a Mexican or Mexicans who want to study either as undergraduates or graduates? What are the programs that I think are most attractive, or what would you say Oxford has to offer a Mexican as opposed to Chinese or an Italian or a Brazilian?
Well, I suppose at some level the things that Oxford has to offer are generic, and let's pass those by. Oxford has a long-lasting interest in the region. I think our Latin America Centre was probably the first in a UK university, and it celebrates, and even that's only recent, celebrates its 50th anniversary this year. But we have a critical mass of people interested in a whole series of different ranges of activities here. And let's go back to what the university is actually doing here, because I think that's part of the way you make connections. So our medical division has big projects now running here in diabetes, obesity, in general aspects of health, actually, and interestingly in perinatal health. How does what happens if you're born to a malnourished mother? How does your upbringing change? How does your development change? There's lots of action going on here. And I think it's wonderful to have students from a country containing, if you like, some of the subjects of study to be both in Oxford, where some of the thinking takes place, and then here at the front end where some of the action takes place. Okay. But of course there are other areas in which it would seem to me we really have things to offer. Mexico's a really, well, I don't have to tell you, it's an extraordinary country, the way it's changing. Where is its leadership role in Latin America? Oxford does leadership. We really are good on leadership. In fact, if you compare Oxford to Harvard there, I can't resist saying, since 1945, 45 world leaders have come through Oxford, 28 through Harvard.
Okay.
They're doing well.
Okay.
Admittedly, they have 8 presidents, and we only did 1.
Okay.
But of our 26 prime ministers, Harvard never produced a single one. So I think what a student would find would not just be a place that's supportive, that's true of everybody, but it's a place that has a real interest in what happens here. And through, say, the School of Government, or if you like, the business school, or the work that goes on in engineering or in medicine, these are all, there are people working on topics that really matter to this country. Okay. And I think those links are the ones that I'd love to see strengthened in 2015, the year where we celebrate particularly our relationship. And I think we have the ability to do that. So that's, come to Oxford, see what it's like, and bring back here what we've given you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for a very interesting conversation about higher education, Professor Rawlins. Tenemos que hacer una pausa y ahorita regresamos. Quédese aquí, que continúa la hora de opinar.